We are here today in Washington, D.C. for the Bitcoin Policy Summit, their second annual event. I'm joined here today by Ben Gagnon, CMO of BitFarms. Ben, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. It's been a great summit so far, and I think there's a lot of people here who are eager to learn more about this space and what it means for this country.
You just gave a presentation on Bitcoin mining and the energy incentives that it provides. Could you kind of give me your base thesis on that presentation and how it's a pro for energy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at its core, what Bitcoin mining is a free market economic incentive to minimize energy waste, minimize your emissions, and monetize the most cost-effective energy resources on the planet. So, when you look around the United States and you look around where Bitcoin miners have largely located in Texas, the reason why they've done that is because they've installed so much electrical capacity in the forms of wind farms and solar panel farms, not because there was a ton of demand there or a huge amount of demand there, but that's because economically that's where they got the best use of the subsidies and the programs to finance the construction of these facilities. But now you've got multiple gigawatts worth of energy infrastructure with no demand, and it's creating a really volatile market price. You've got negative pricing sometimes. You've got pricing that can swing, from $10 megawatt hour to $5,000 megawatt hour. And Bitcoin mining is not really being driven by any sort of policy there, but it's there because it's absorbing those inefficiencies that the market has introduced through policy. And when you look around at this country, a lot of America's success is about our ability to harness energy, to convert it into other materials, other resources. And Bitcoin mining is another way for us to rethink about energy in America, to invest in new infrastructure projects, to revitalize communities that have been overlooked and forgotten, where these energy resources are vast and cost effective, but need some other component there in the mix to make them worthwhile.
There's certainly a lot on the infrastructure side that I feel like nobody just knows about, and something as soon as you start talking about it, like it clicks.
Yeah.
And I know BitFarms has been able to operate not just in the US, but globally, and I can imagine from an infrastructure standpoint that there's been a lot of lessons learned in operating in some of these other jurisdictions. To tell me a little bit about the lessons learned and how maybe you could better shape U.S. policy moving forward and operating in these other areas.
Yeah, we operate in 4 countries, 3 languages. Personally, I built Bitcoin mines in 6 countries at this point. There is a lot going on in terms of energy infrastructure around the world, and usually the markets that we're looking at are areas where historically they invested a lot into hydroelectric capacity and generation to power old industry. In the areas of Quebec and Washington that we are in, this hydroelectric power is there to power aluminum smelting and timber mills and paper factories, and in some cases gold mining, and all these sorts of heavy industry resource applications. But over time, these industries have largely moved on. A lot of them have gone offshore. A lot of this infrastructure is sitting there underutilized. It's not as if the dam went, with the business. Mm-hmm. The dam stayed in place in the river. And there's a lot of opportunity here, especially in the more rural parts of America that have been kind of forgotten as these anchor companies, that whole towns were built around have gone and picked up and left. And I think where the real opportunity is for America and its energy policy is to understand that, there is an ability and an opportunity here to reinvest in American infrastructure projects and also to revitalize the infrastructure projects we already have that, for decades they've gone underutilized. In 7 of our 8 facilities that were operating in Quebec, for instance, they're all in former industrial plants that were abandoned for years, in some cases decades. These are factories that used to make hockey sticks and all sorts of different things. But for a multitude of reasons, those businesses were driven out and nobody's wanted to invest in these rural communities. Bitcoin miners are the ones who are seeking out these rural opportunities. It's not Fortune 500, companies who are trying to locate in these rural communities. It's the Bitcoin miners driven by that free market energy incentive, that free market economic incentive to go and find these pockets of energy that have been so overlooked. And so, when we go out into rural communities and we're investing there, like the reception that we get locally is tremendous, right? The mayors understand the benefits, the people in the town understand the benefits, the municipal tax revenues go up. You're talking about the creation of high-paying tech jobs in an area that doesn't see a lot of investment, and especially not a lot of new technologies and new businesses coming in to disrupt. So it gives these rural areas an opportunity that otherwise they just wouldn't really have. And so when you look around at what we can do in this country I think America really needs to focus on developing much more energy resources of all sorts of kinds. They need to be focusing on expanding the infrastructure in terms of the distribution, the transmission, and how can Bitcoin mining come in here and fill a natural gap that has always existed in our electrical system. And that gap is the gap between supply and demand. It's the only economic equilibrium on the planet where the absolute equilibrium is not where supply equals demand. It's where demand just exceeds supply. Supply just exceeds demand. Because if you have demand just exceeding supply, you have a blackout or a brownout, people run out of power. And so you always have had this kind of built-in excess capacity. We've never had the technology to monetize it, use it, take advantage of it. And this is where Bitcoin mining is really starting to find its natural fit in our ecosystem, is monetizing this gap between electricity supply and demand, and making use of a resource that for most of time since electricity was invented has been wasted. It's actually the number one electricity use is just waste. So we could as an industry grow, I think, something like 1,700 times without actually the world producing one extra watt of power, just by trying to absorb the inefficiencies that are already here in the system.
Yeah, it's incredible. Last question for you, Ben. Is the future of Bitcoin mining here in the US?
I think Bitcoin mining has a tremendous future here in the United States. But certainly it's not limited to the United States. It's going to go anywhere that's really focusing on energy policies, right? What are the areas where they're going to invest the most in energy infrastructure? What are the areas that have the best energy resources, the lowest costs, the highest efficiencies? And whoever or whatever region does that, Bitcoin miners are going to flock there in droves because they're going to be driven by that free market incentive. We see it has happened quite a lot in Texas and other areas, but there's a lot of other areas in the United States where it's just ripe for potential. And I think this technology is barely scratching the surface of what's possible.
Certainly a lot to come in the near future. Ben, super excited to see what's going on with BitFarms. Can't wait to talk at the next summit here.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cheers.